So next up, we have our very own Visual K EAM expert. His name is Luis Echevarria. He's been with Visual K a little bit over 9 years. He's one of our senior consultants, and he's done implementations, he's done integrations, he's done many different solutions related to EAM. And without further ado, let's welcome Luis Echevarria, and he'll be talking about nonconformities. So let's see.
All right, Ernesto, thanks. Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about nonconformities and mobility in EAM. Okay, a little bit about what we're going to be looking at is what are nonconformities, what is a basic configuration in Infor EAM, probably a case scenario in terms of a Hertz water chemistry and corrosion control, and out of that, how we see all of that configuration coming to life right from EAM. Okay, so let's start with over here. What is Infor EAM nonconformities, right? So during our day-to-day, we typically see anomalies. We typically see events that we are encouraged to capture the data, encouraged to report it in some way, right, to the upper management, because we want to study that behavior, right, what is happening out of that. The interesting part of this is that these are things that not necessarily you are in need to fix them right away, right? Because these are very, at that moment, they're very insignificant. They're very, nothing that someone has to worry about, right? But we want to keep track of them. For example, let's say you have a crack, right, in a surface, right? Probably that crack, as you see it, uh, over time, it starts to grow and grow and keep growing until it really compromises any equipment that is within that surface, right? What we want to be able to is to measure that out, right? To observe how it starts incrementing, right, as time passes. And for that, we definitely need something to capture that type of data, right? This is not something that you will do like a work order just to capture that out, right? Because it's more of an observance into it. Right? So with Infor EAM, basically what we can do is that we can track those changes, uh, uh, those areas where we see these nonconformities keep growing and growing. We can capture readings out of it. We can store the pictures. We want to be able to measure it out completely in sort of way that we can track. We can have like a little digital package in our environment where we have all of these things stored in. Okay, so let's see a little bit about what type of the general configuration, right? Basic configuration to get this process going, right? So in that end, right, we typically will need like task plans, right? Because our task plans have everything prepackaged into it, right? It can have all the activities, it can have all the checklists that you need to verify what you are observing at that moment, right? We want to also have some aspects, right? Because we in an inspection we use our aspects in such a way that we can, within that aspect, we can pinpoint the different points that we want to track based on that nonconformity, right? We also look at findings, right? how on a qualitative way we can address the situation and give an overall finding of how we're looking at the current situation for that crack or for that corrosion in a place within the environment, right? All of that. So looking at that, so instead of going directly into Infor EAM, let's go a little bit further, right? And let's talk about a little bit of a scenario, right? So we have a heresy, water chemistry and corrosion control, right? Why would we do this, right? We want to have an optimal equipment, right? We want to have a healthy one, and because with that we want to maintain high levels of production, right? We want that equipment to keep running as it's supposed to, keep generating, in this case, uh, the overall aspect to generate energy, uh, constantly high levels of them. So in that sense, uh, we want to make sure that those equipments are optimal condition, they are healthy, and they will respond to anything that we put them into, right? Also, we want to control corrosion, right? We want to make sure that corrosion is within our levels, that we don't we want to make sure that they are uh, within those so that nothing compromises the whole system, right? We want to also maintain steam purity. We want to maintain the quality of steam, right? And how we can track it? Well, basically, you can track it with a piece of paper. That's one idea. But in terms of that, does that make sense? If you're gonna be capturing data such as measurements, if you put on a piece of paper, that really gets into that piece of paper and that's it, right? No one else will be looking at it. uh, there's no trending out of that because everything is on a piece of paper. But if we use a system such as Infor EAM, where we can log all that data, and out of that data create reports, create trending, create dashboards out of those, right? So that we can use the data that we're capturing for further use to make some adjustment in the future or make some key decisions, right, uh, within what we have gathered so far and how that uh, non-conformity it's growing. Okay, so let's now look at what Infor EAM has for us, right, in terms of a general configuration. And basically, uh, let's see one in action, and then let's see how we can capture those through our mobility device. Okay, so I'm gonna jump over here into Infor EAM, and I'm gonna go quickly through the different areas, right? So we're gonna see about aspects, right? The aspect is a characteristic that you want to measure, right? So for example, I'm just going to select this one over here, right? It has code, it has a description, right? You can select if it has some time dependency out of it, but your typical basic information would be your code and description, right? That's how we start to gather things out, right? How we want to group things out of those readings in there, okay? Now from there, let's talk about, let's go over here and look for point types, right? So in the point type, I'm gonna look for something such as Steam, right? So here we have a point type called Steam measurements. Now, out of those measurements, we have a point type because probably we have different set or different points that we need to measure, right? Right in there on that specific nonconformity that we are observing, right? So in that end, we use the point type because that will help us group, and also it will help us uh, make a little bit easier on the entering of the data into the system. And also, once you enter the data and you have it, then you can use it for analyze the data that you're getting in there, right? So we use that point type because that will help us analyze it a little bit better, because you don't have to do like on a one by one point, because you will use all the point types that have the same characteristics, and with that you can measure and analyze data accordingly. Okay. The other area that we want to review are our findings, right? These are, most of them are qualitative uh, uh, findings, right? So you visually inspect what you're looking at, and at that moment you give an overall uh, estimate of what is happening in there, right? And you say that it's high or it's low, right? Or it's within limits or out of limits, right? Those things are basically the things that we want to capture, and we need to define how you definitely are going to do those uh, checks for that nonconformity. So based on how you're going to be doing or performing that type part of the job, then basically with that we can define the different findings that we need for that inspection. Okay. Now let's look at, for example, we're gonna go in here into the task plans. Now the task plans, we're gonna look for something called, let's see, this comes up, perfect, right? And we have a task plan over here that really looks at daily Hershey chemistry log, okay? Now, in terms of configuration, as you see, it's very simple, just as you do as your normal task plans for your PMs, right? But you definitely have a code, you definitely have a description, right? You definitely, if you want to capture some type of a checklist out of that using that task plan, basically you need to make this checkbox available over here, right? If you want to make the person who is acquiring the data signs in on that, well, you make to mark it also. And if you have some type of reviewer of that information, also you need to mark it out. Now in the follow-up area, um, basically you have uh, based on your observance, it's how you're going to be either generating a work order out of that if it's needed or not. Well, basically this area handles that out, right? So in the case that you need an actual work order based on an observation that you're doing for the chemistry log, then basically you need to make this available, right? You're going to put a description for that work order, type of work order that you want that to come out, uh, the the status of that work order, so that when it gets generated, it goes to the correct status and hence to the correct person to look at it, right? And then some priority in that sense if you want need to. One important aspect over here is the revision control, right? So all of these task plans have revision control. Why is that? Because, for example, let's say that for now you have these areas over here where you are capturing data, right? But let's say that as time passes and as that nonconformity keeps growing, basically you want to be able to do a further inspection with some additional checks into it, right? So if you want to track how this task plan came from the original one to the current version one, then you definitely will want to uh, turn on the revision control. So in that sense, you get the approvals just to make sure to make the necessary changes so the task plan gets up to date in such a way. Okay. Now you can add also the instructions, and you can also, right, like we saw just a moment ago, on the checklist, we can add all the different checklists that we need to, right? If you see this checklist, they have a description, they need a sequence, right? And over here, you're gonna see how all of these data, master data, gets into one single space, right? For example, we talk about aspect. Well, we add the aspect over here. We added the point type over there so that when that reading gets done, basically you will have all the different areas where you can pull the information for a specific group so that you can analyze it better, right? Also, it has an equipment class, basically because of when we use that equipment class is that if we have further equipment and you have some point types that are not for that specific type of equipment, then basically with that you can control the things that you want to be measuring out of a root of equipment in terms of the configuration that is in place. Okay. The other important thing when we're looking at and talking about nonconformities is that this checkbox over here it's enabled for nonconformities, right? You have to mark it, you have to make it available so that when you're doing that type of populating or gathering the data right in the field, basically that that checklist will appear in that specific sequence as you have set it up normally. Okay, so that's basically, I think that's basically the most general aspects, right, in terms of nonconformity of master data, right? There are a couple of things more to look at. For example, right, in nonconformities, we have the nonconformity types. Okay, so over here we can definitely set up all the different types of nonconformities that we have in place, right? So let's for example, we have a nonconformity type of severity minor. It has a task plan checklist associated to it. Okay, so for example, out of these, you can have a nonconformity type for corrosion, for leaks, for I don't know, the composition of wood, for example. All of those are can be non-conformity types that you can use, and you can configure them so that you can start grouping basically on what you're gathering data from. Okay. So aside from that, now let's look at the actual screen that we can look at non-conformities. Okay, and these over here, right? This is the non-conformity uh, screen itself. I'm gonna look for one over here so that we can take a quick look at that, right? So we got this nonconformity SP3PH, the PH type. We have the equipment that where that nonconformity it's located. We have the requirement. You can also include the location if it's within the hierarchy setup. Uh, you can define the type of nonconformity. Okay. Also, you can specify the type of material that you want to that is that affecting the actual nonconformity. And also, like many of the screens that we have in EAM, we have a status, right? Typically, the conformities are very simple. They have an open and close setup in terms of the status. While it's open, you can keep doing revisions into it, right? You can keep looking for new readings out of that nonconformity. Now, when it's closed, basically you're saying that it's completely, it's repaired, everything it's set up as it's supposed to. Okay, you can specify priorities for that nonconformity, the severity of it, the intensity of it, the important, if it's direct impact, indirect, right, or it's something statics in terms of. Also, you can specify when you're actually going to be repairing, right? This is like a recommendation. It's nothing that it's you can change it as time goes on. Okay, and also the system will tell you when it's the next inspection, right? Where you're supposed to go in there and generate new observations out of it. Okay. Basically, also, once you have your nonconformity, let's say that you want to repair it, then you have this button over here, create a work order, where you can actually create that, the work management side of it, so that you can put the necessary activities in order to repair it, or in order to, let's say, not fully repair it, just to remedy for some time until you have additional budget to fully repair it, right? So you can generate as much as work orders you want from that specific nonconformity. Okay. Now jumping into the actual observations, we're gonna see uh, the observations over here, right? Once you have a new observation, you can just go in here and just generate a new observation. That new observation will have task plans that is associated into it. You can put your notes into that. You can give a condition into it, and basically it will give you all the necessary data that you want to capture out of that nonconformity at that moment. Okay. Now, because it has a task plan, right? We also have the checklist, right? So for each observation that you have, and you will have set it up with some checklist, then you can go in here and capture and put the values that you are actually looking at for that specific nonconformity. It can be a numeric value, it can be a qualitative finding, it can be simple as a completed result or not, right? It depends on what you want to capture for that specific nonconformity. Now, just a reminder, right in the task plan, we said that we can have basically someone to sign in, and also when they do the actual uh, observation, and someone who reviews it. So this is the area where the people can go in and sign in accordingly. Okay. So now one of the things that we have is that we have seen that through the interface of the computer, which makes it a little bit of a hassle, right? Because then you need to go out with your piece of paper, go out there, pick it up, and put your observations into it, and then go over here, open your Infor EAM system, look for your nonconformity, add a new observation, and put that in, right? So the idea is much simpler than that. Okay, so let's look at what are you supposed to do when you have these type of things that you want to capture, right? So let's jump into the mobile side of EAM. Okay, and over here we have our application, and we're gonna look for the our operator checklist, right? As simple as that. We're gonna look for an equipment. So let me just look for the equipment that I'm searching for. Okay, a second that comes up. Right, and that's not it. Let me just change this out. This is not the equipment that I wanted. All right. Okay, I'm gonna look for my system or my equipment, and I'm gonna look for my operator checklist, which is a task plan with all the things that I want to capture out of it. Right? I'm gonna search it out, and I have my chemistry log over here. I'm gonna click on save, and then from there, as you see, it's gonna open up, and it's gonna bring up all the areas that we want to capture for that specific equipment based on the non-conformity that we have and the things that we want to capture out of it. Okay. In that sense, for example, it's going to ask us if it was serious, severe, if it's okay. That is part of our non-conformity and how we set it up. So basically, how you put it in there is going to show up over here, right? And you can say, specify if it's okay. You can just put notes over here. So let's gonna put here equipment. So far, so good. Okay. You can also, we're gonna take the picture, but you can definitely also add documentation or take a picture of it if you need to. Okay. So you can capture all that and capture all that documentation right in there. So once you're good to go, you move to the next one and so on, right? So you have the different things that you want to capture. For example, in this one, we want to capture a value. I'm gonna put here 0.01 and so on. Again, it's gonna show you if it's okay in terms of the non-conformity. If you want to create a follow-up based on that observation, because you have set it up normally in your task plan, then you can just click on the follow-up button over here, and that will show us exactly and generate a work order for that specific area. Okay. So in terms, basically, once you have that, it gets synchronized, then we can see it right in Infor EAM. We get our observations, we get any documentation, a picture that you took from that. You're gonna see it right in the system for that purpose, right? So the idea is that this becomes a little bit small package with all the observations that you've gone through up to the point that you need to repair that non-conformity in such a way. Okay? And that is basically a general setup of a non-conformity in EM with the basic information just to get it going, right? You can put it as complex as you want, or you can have it as simple as you want. That is up to you, and that will be basically on how you're going to be capturing the data. Okay. So if anyone has questions, we have some spare time for now. Just let me know, and we'll be here to capture those out. Or if you prefer to send them over through emails, yeah, you can also do that.
Thank you, Luis. So there are a couple of questions. First off, do we need to purchase something else to get this going in EAM, or is it built in?
No, this is right built in. This is part of the basic modules that come with Infor EAM. If you have at least a license for the mobile, then that should be good to use it in the mobile also. But it's already in there and ready for you to configure and to use it accordingly.
Good to know. Also, you said this can be as complex or as simple as you want it. What's the basic configuration that you would need? Do we need to set up a task plan or something like that, and that's it? Or how far do we need to go?
You, right, you can set up a task plan and set up your non-conformity type, and basically with that you can move forward, right? Based on the task plan, if you have some qualitative findings, then you will need some findings set up for that. But if you leave it as completed or not, very simple ones that you want to capture, then that's good to go with that end. So your task plans and your nonconformity types, and then just create your nonconformity.
Thank you very much. Okay, guys, so we're taking a 30-minute break. We'll be back at 3 o'clock Eastern time. So we'll come back and we'll see you back then. Thank you.